Many people still talk about resilience as if it were a personality trait, something you either have or you do not. But resilient science has moved far beyond that idea. Over roughly 50 years, the field has changed its central question 4 times, from identifying resilient people to explaining processes, testing interventions, and studying interacting systems. Today, developmental resilience is better understood as the capacity of a dynamic system to adapt successfully when significant challenges threaten functioning, survival, or development. That definition matters because it moves resilience out of the person alone. Time, relationships, families, schools, communities, biology, and culture can all become part of the explanation. Ann Maston and colleagues describe this history as 4 waves of developmental resilience science. The waves overlap, and older questions never completely disappear, but each wave changed what researchers thought resilience was and what practitioners could do with the idea. The first wave, beginning in earnest in the 1970s, was largely descriptive. Researchers studied children and young people exposed to serious adversity and asked a deceptively simple question. Why do some show relatively positive adaptation, while others facing similar risks struggle much more? This first wave clarified something that remains fundamental. To study resilience, researchers need evidence of 2 things. First, a significant risk, threat, or adversity, and second, some criterion showing relatively positive adaptation in its aftermath. Without adversity, we may be studying competence or well-being, but not resilience in the strict developmental sense. Early studies repeatedly identified resources associated with better outcomes: problem-solving abilities, self-regulation, effective caregiving, supportive adults, positive school experiences, and access to opportunities. These were not magic shields. They were clues about the adaptive systems that might be helping development stay on course. The second wave shifted the question from what to how. Researchers became less interested in making lists of resilient traits and more interested in mechanisms. How does a supportive relationship actually change the impact of risk? Why does the timing of adversity matter? Why can the same child function well in one domain and struggle in another? Michael Rutter's work on protective mechanisms was crucial here. A protective process can reduce the impact of risk, interrupt negative chain reactions, support self-esteem and self-efficacy, or open new opportunities. The focus moves from possessing a trait to understanding how risk and protection interact over time. This process perspective also changed the emotional tone of the field. Maston famously described resilience as ordinary magic. The point was not that adversity is easy, it was that positive adaptation often depends on ordinary human systems working reasonably well: caregiving, attachment, self-regulation, problem-solving, relationships, schools, and communities. The third wave asked a more demanding question. If we think we understand resilience processes, can we change them? This brought intervention research to the center of the field. Instead of only observing who did well, researchers began testing whether changing risk, resources, or protective processes could improve outcomes. A resilience framework suggests at least 3 broad intervention routes. We can reduce exposure to risk. We can increase promotive resources that benefit development more generally, or we can strengthen protective systems that become especially important under conditions of adversity. Randomized and quasi-experimental studies matter because they do more than ask whether 2 variables are associated. They can test causal ideas. If strengthening parenting, improving school support, or changing a stressful environment leads to better adaptation, that gives us stronger evidence about how resilience processes actually work. By the 2000s, a 4th wave was rising. Resilience science became explicitly multilevel and systems-oriented. New methods made it possible to study processes spanning biology, behavior, relationships, families, schools, communities, and wider social environments. This changed the unit of analysis. A child is not an isolated container of resilience. The child is embedded in interacting systems. A supportive teacher may influence motivation. Motivation can change school engagement. School success can alter peer relationships and future opportunities. Effects can cascade across levels and across time. The fourth wave also opened the door to questions that earlier researchers could not investigate well: gene-environment interplay, neurobiological regulation, developmental timing, and links between individual adaptation and broader ecological conditions. The aim is not to reduce resilience to biology, but to understand how levels influence one another. Large-scale disasters and social disruptions made another point impossible to ignore. Resilience at one level can depend on resilience at another. Families depend on schools, health systems, neighborhoods, infrastructure, and policy. A breakdown in one system can create cascading risks, while strong systems can create cascading protection. In a 2024 reflection on the field, Maston asked whether a fifth wave may now be emerging. The proposed direction is deeper multisystem integration, understanding resilience within interacting, interdependent, complex adaptive systems, and designing interventions that work across those systems rather than targeting one isolated level. So after 4 waves of research, asking whether a child is resilient is often the wrong starting point. Resilience is not a permanent label. It can vary by domain, context, developmental period, and the resources that are available. A person can adapt well in one area and struggle in another, or change over time. For educators, parents, and helping professionals, 3 questions are usually more useful. What is threatening adaptation right now? Which adaptive systems and resources are already working? And what can we realistically strengthen in the person, the relationships around them, or the wider environment? That is the central lesson of 50 years of resilience science. Resilience is not simply toughness, optimism, or a personality trait. It is successful adaptation unfolding through dynamic processes across time and systems. And that is precisely why resilience can be supported. We can change environments, relationships, opportunities, and protective processes, not only ask individuals to become stronger. In the next video, we will move from the history of the science to practice, the protective factors that repeatedly matter in children's development, and what educators and parents can actually do to strengthen them. If that is the kind of evidence-informed resilience content you are looking for, subscribe to Resilience in Practice.